This is a recap of the purchase of a Ford 1956 F100 from a gentleman who lived at the Jehovah's Witness complex in Wallkill, New York. This is the truck in the advertising photos that had come in from Washington State just about 2 months previous to my purchasing it. We went to Wallkill on Halloween. I made the deal, gave him a deposit. And these are the photos I took the day I gave him the deposit. We met in a parking lot at a shopping plaza in Pine Bush, which is right near Wallkill. Has a V8 engine, Y block. The next week I readied my Suburban with a rotating beacon and a tow dolly. And I'm checking out the lights here. And the next morning we were ready to roll. Dick and I headed to Wallkill, which is down in the Catskill Mountains. Met the gentleman in this parking lot, went to the bank, and soon I was towing a 56 Ford pickup truck home behind me. We did attract some attention when we stopped on the way. The first time I drove the truck was to get it from the tow dolly into my garage the following morning. That is the only time I've driven the truck. It has a custom dual exhaust on it and manual transmission with overdrive, 3-speed on the column. The first thing I did was get it up, get the rear wheels off, try to find out why the parking brake did not work. It turned out to be a bad parking brake cable and bad rear brakes. They were worn out, so I replaced them. The VIN tag was missing off the door frame, so I bought a reproduction and stamped in the numbers that were on the frame and on the registration. Underneath the hood it looked like an old farm truck, even though the engine was rebuilt 30 years ago according to the seller. So it needed some sprucing up, and attention to an oil leak at the valve cover gaskets was the first thing I needed to fix. So apparently they resurrected this truck a few months ago to get it on a truck and ship it to New York State. And when they did, they put a new battery cable on, which makes a certain amount of sense if it's been sitting a while. And they also must have put a brand new battery in it, stuck it in there with a bungee cord. They routed this battery cable up from underneath, and there's a loop it's supposed to go through to keep it away from the exhaust. They didn't even bother putting it through there. They come up here and they twisted it across this yellow wire, so it was stretching. The battery cable was stretching this yellow wire. So I'm straightening it out. They must have actually just threw this thing together. They used a zip tie around here that I already cut off just to get the truck running. But it's not all bad. It's just that they obviously did this in haste. They're trying to get the thing running and get it out of town. I'm sure this happened out in Washington State. But in any case, there's some good things. New battery and a new battery cable. So can't complain about that. Okay, I finally got a parking brake, a working parking brake. Pull the lever in the cab. Back here, wheels locked. New cables underneath. New rear cable under here. On both sides. Meeting in the middle. See the new one on the other side. A bit of work. And finally, we'll close it up in the morning. The engine had a fuel line. It was just a rubber hose going up past the exhaust manifold, so that had to be changed. The fuel tank is in the cab on the 56. I disconnected the fuel line right here, going to the engine. I put a temporary plug there, and this is going across the bottom of the cab, and it comes out down here, right here. So now I don't have a siphoning of the fuel coming out of the tank, so I'm going to run a hard line here. I'm going to run this out of here up to the carburetor, and then there's a flexible line that goes from here to there. I've got a new hard line right here. Goes all the way up to rubber hose, double clamped, and up into this fuel filter, which is a new filter I bought locally for this Motorcraft 2100 carburetor. There was no choke at all on the carburetor, and I replaced the fuel filter, and for $21 I installed an electric choke for this car. Okay, first start with carburetor, with a new carburetor filter, new fuel line, no fuel leak, new carburetor gasket, and electric choke. Sounds better than it ever did. Sounds really good. Running good. My new electric choke is right here, and it's almost fully open, so it's working. Oh yeah, it sounds real good. The battery tray was completely rotted out, so I purchased a new one and painted it with epoxy paint. It needed a little bit of a modification to take a wider battery, and the hold down bracket I fabricated from angle steel. Alright, so now I'm looking at this fresh air vent under the dash here. You put the lever forward, it opens up the vent to let fresh air in, okay? On this truck, it's just a gaping hole up underneath here. When you move that lever, it's just wide open to the outside here, right under the dashboard. Just opens it right up to the rain, and everything comes swooshing in. Crazy simple. Anyways, it wasn't working. It's all lubed up now, working real smooth. It's when they called this a truck in those days, there it is, wide open. When they called it a truck in those days, they weren't kidding. There's no luxuries here at all in this thing. Take this cover off this dome light. No bulb in there. Now, I got this small courtesy light bulb. It's all I've got. Wow, it works. Works. We have a dome light now. Well, being that I had the floor pan off, which exposes the transmission, I did that so I could change the parking brake cable. I degreased it yesterday, and it sure looks a lot better than it did. It was really coated in grease. I also, while I was at it, I went underneath the engine and I degreased the oil pan. A few engine components, alternator brackets, and the coil bracket. Painted Ford engine red, sprucing up the engine compartment. once I was into it this far, I decided to remove all the outside components and completely degrease and repaint the engine with ceramic Ford engine red. Covered the areas that did not need paint with tin foil. Came out pretty decent in the end, and I painted the shroud around the fan, the top of the radiator. The rest of the engine compartment I'm going to leave alone, kind of original, except there was some duct tape and things like that. I straightened that all out eventually. That was on the firewall. Had to take the speedometer completely apart. So I took it apart, and it wasn't really designed to come apart. I had to grind out a couple of bent over edges, and I'll have to reattach with some JB Weld. And as I cleaned up the glass as best I could, and I took the gauges out here, which needed some cleaning up. They were covered in dust, and then the speedometer is not repairable, but this whole unit is available brand new for $159. So that is already on order. So when that comes back, I should have a decent looking working speedometer and gauge cluster. The speedometer was supposed to be silver, not the color of the body, so that was done. Okay, this came out pretty good. Completely cleaned it, disassembled, repainted it silver, put the glass back in, and the glass is totally perfect. Luckily I didn't break it or anything. It's looking really good to me. Really, really good. Alright, here we have the seat bottom upside down with the adjusting tracks, and none of this worked. It was all frozen up. So underneath here, and here, there's nuts that come off, and both sides come off with 4 nuts and washers. And this is the adjusting lever here. All this stuff is frozen up, but mostly because the tracks were all dried up under here. So I washed them out in a parts washer. This spindle across here is a gear to keep them timed. There's like a rack here with a gear in it, so that when you rotate the shaft or move this one side, the other side follows through and stays in time, so the seat doesn't shift as it's being moved back and forth. There's 7 positions on this, and it's pretty hard for me to do this with one hand, so it will rotate back like this, and you see the shaft turns, and that allows it to stay in time. Both of them move at the same time. The heat valve in right here, it works perfectly. Right, absolutely perfect. Windshield wipers. This is the brand new speedometer right out of the box. It's a reproduction exact in every way. Here it is with the lights. Got the bright light, and you got the oil, and you got the temp all showing now. Well, I was able to set the mileage to the same mileage that was on the vehicle. As you can see, hopefully, 28,115. 28,115. So it's all put back together. Look at that. Working. Smooth too. Okay, I'm testing all systems. I'm going to turn the key on. I have the oil light. I have a left directional. I have a right directional. It's interesting how that light's leaking down into the instrument though. It's funny. And my headlights are on now. I have dashboard lights. And when I press the brights, I get the bright light indicator. The gas gauge is working. The temperature gauge is not hooked up yet, so that wouldn't be working. The only thing that looks, the battery light is not working, but that's probably due to the fact that the generator was removed and replaced by an alternator. Okay, we're looking at the temperature gauge. I'm going to turn the key on. It looks like it's going towards the cold side. The engine is cold. Well, it's been running a little bit. So it appears that that is working. Down to cold. The only thing I don't have is the battery light is not working. But I'm pretty sure that's because of the generator, because I put a new bulb in there. Okay, here we got the floor mat in place. Had a cutout for the pedals. Got the seat in. This is pulling the kingpins off the axle. I eventually pulled the springs right out. I'm going to replace both springs with new springs. I want the truck to sit up level. I don't like that nose low look. Doing the kingpins and reaming them out was a very difficult job, very difficult. But eventually I got it. Here's the truck without any front axle on it, waiting for the springs to arrive. Then the springs did arrive, but in the meanwhile I worked on the interior. And here's the axle with the new kingpins and new tie rod ends ready to go. Well, I managed to get the headliner in. One piece unit with two fold down sides sewn on up along there. Two screws in the ceiling. And a rubber molding goes all the way around the door and above the windshield. In the video here it probably looks a little uneven, but believe me, it's in there okay. It's the only way it could possibly put in. So now rear view mirror, sun visors, and I have to cut a hole up here for the dome light, right where that X is. Install the dome light. Well, I guess the interior is completely done now. So, got the seat in, my matching gray seat belts, and they're actually Ford seat belts. Apparently that's the Ford design. And the headliner's in, sun visors, rear view mirror, dome light. Dome light works. All the trim is in across here. Up here we have the seat belt, which is a shoulder belt and comes and snaps in there. And it looks like it works really well. The only thing I notice is if I tilt the seat back forward, the seat belt gets caught underneath the stop here. But I don't think I could move this forward, but I don't think I need to because there's no reason to go back there. You go back there so seldom. All that's back there is the gas tank. So I think I'm all done with the interior, everything. They got new door panels, armrest, floor mat, reproduction, a new trim tag here, a VIN tag, seat belts, headliner, dome light, door panels, kick panels, new sun visors on both sides. Over here I have a brand new speedometer in there, painted the silver part. Over here I have a brand new cigarette lighter, reproduction, and no battery right now. The horn works. Brand new master cylinder. Park and brake has been restored with a new cable. Well, there's a snowstorm outside, but it's really not that bad. Back in the garage, I got the hood supported on a table upside down, and I removed 2 of the braces off the bottom. These braces would go across here like this. They go from there to there. Okay, one on each side. You have to remove those because to put the hood reversing kit on, they're replaced by parts that come in the kit. So I took those off. I took the emblems off the side and the emblem off the front because I'm going to be replacing those. Other than that, I've run out of parts because I got the brakes all ready to go. I got a new drag link there, shiny black rod, and I've got new springs. But I do not have the grease seals for the wheel bearings, so I can't put the wheel bearings in place, so I can't put the front wheels on it yet. But they're coming tomorrow, and then the truck will be back down on its wheels. I'll be interested in seeing what that looks like with the new springs. So the only part I've got left is a rear brake hose that goes underneath by the rear axle, and I'm not really geared up to be doing that right now. And the hood reversing kit is on order, and the spare tire wheel is on order, and I'm somewhat held up because of those items. I want to keep working every day, but can't without the proper parts. So the only other thing I did in here, and I put a switch for the dome light. I installed this switch over here. The battery's not hooked up. This will turn the dome light on irregardless of whether the door is open, because it's normally controlled by this push button switch right here that I installed earlier in this restoration. So you'll be able to turn the dome light on when you're inside with the door closed. And if you don't want the dome light at all, there's a switch on the dome light, you can just shut it off. Well, that's where I am today. Gonna call it quits, go grab some supper, and wait till the parts come tomorrow. Putting decals on the tailgate of the truck, not as hard as you would think, using a little Dawn dish soap here, any kind of dish soap, and they line right up. The letters, when you look at them before you put them on, look too delicate for the application, but apparently not. Okay, to recap what's been done on the 56 Ford F100, it needed horns, so I replaced the horns. I replaced the speedometer cable and then the speedometer itself. The battery tray was replaced with a new one. A parking brake cable was, the rear parking brake cable, not the front, was completely rotted and rusted and needed to be replaced, and the rear brake shoes were worn out. I put a reproduction cigarette lighter in there that the custom cab model was supposed to have. I replaced fuel lines from the tank, and then from the fuel filter up to the carburetor. I installed an electric choke for $21. I replaced the valve cover gaskets. I fixed and lubricated the seat. I replaced the brake master cylinder, which was leaking, and there was a seized up rear wheel cylinder I replaced. The windshield wiper assembly under the dashboard had a link with a worn out bushing. That was replaced. The heater water control valve was not repairable and had been disconnected, so I put a heater water control valve in the heater hose and used the same control cable for it. The door inspection panels on both doors were missing. They probably were never on there because this was a custom cab model with inner door panels, but I replaced those panels anyways with new steel panels, and I replaced the interior and the sun visors with new ones, and the headliner, and I replaced or I installed tailgate chain covers, which were missing. So there's going to be some more to come. I also changed the oil, put a new oil filter on, changed the fuel filter, and changed the air filter. Some of these parts were available locally, some had to be special ordered. And I replaced the drag link, both tie rod ends, both front springs, the kingpins, and I am going to be receiving 2 new front shocks, and relubed the front wheel bearings and installing new grease seals there. So up to now, this is the 26th of January of 2023. That's where I'm at.